understanding me really starts with understanding who Adorsky Talk was as a 3-year-old. And that's because that was the age at which I first really found my voice. I would go to this boulder in a park nearby and I would get on top of there and start giving speeches about anything that I cared about and why I should be president. And around the age of 6, when my mom got me my first laptop, I was finally able to really find my voice through writing. I would write stories every day. Sometimes I wouldn't want to eat dinner because that's how deeply engrossed I would be in what I was writing. So when one of my friends said to me, "I don't like reading and writing in a nonchalant tone of voice," that really sparked my desire to begin changing things. I presented at local schools, and from a campaign for literacy that I began as a young child, my reach really expanded into youth voice, raising awareness about a variety of causes that I believe in, and ultimately trying to make sure that whoever doesn't have a voice, whoever doesn't have the same opportunity that I had as a 3-year-old to speak up and be heard, that they do get that opportunity.
So what does a 3-year-old, when they find their voice, what does a 3-year-old have to say?
Well, a 3-year-old can actually say a surprising amount, and I think that sometimes we underestimate the amount that we, as either young adults or as adults, can learn from young people. Because when I look back on 3-year-old me and on the very little kids that I know, they have all these amazing qualities, things that we might think of as weaknesses like impulsiveness or naivete, but that can actually be strengths when they're translated in work or in school. Because I know that if I had had all this cynicism of there are so many things that mean blank won't work, there are this many reasons why this is risky or why I shouldn't go to schools and present about my ideas, then I never would have done anything. And I think that a lot of adult organizations can probably learn from that mindset.
What was your message when you were 3?
Well, my message when I was 3 was fairly straightforward. It was vote for Al Gore, or in a few years, vote for me for president. I massively overestimated my age or underestimated the eligibility. But I think that my message truly evolved after that.
What do you do for fun on the weekends when you're hanging out with your friends? What do you do?
When I'm hanging out with my friends, I love to do things that are sports related, go running. I also like to watch movies, do anything involving games, things outdoors, hikes. Washington State has amazing natural beauty when it's not raining.
And what city do you live in?
I live in Redmond. It's a suburb of Seattle.
Sure. So if you could say, I'm 15 years old and I live in Redmond, Washington.
Sure. I'm 15 years old and I live in Redmond, Washington.
One more time.
I'm 15 years old and I live in Redmond, Washington.
Great. Prodigy. Have people called you a prodigy?
People do call me a prodigy. I personally dislike the term just because I think we think of Mozart and people that I am not, and it also definitely limits you because it makes you think of age first instead of whatever you did, whatever you've accomplished.
What is a prodigy?
I think a prodigy is someone who displays unusual skill at a young age. The reason that I don't generally think of myself as a prodigy is because I know a lot of young people who have great things to say, who are very eloquent. In my case, it's just that I've been lucky to have opportunities. I'm lucky to be able to synthesize a lot of what I see and hear, and I'm pretty good at writing. But I would not say that those skills make me a prodigy.
Okay. Literacy. What is literacy?
Literacy means being able to read and write, but increasingly in the 21st century, it also means being able to interpret sources, being able to find bias, and really realize what the truth is. This is an age of information overload, and it's really crucial for the new literacy that young people are able to digest information and figure out what's real and what's not.
What is the new literacy?
The new literacy means being able to figure out what the truth is, finding bias, and increasingly it may also mean knowing a programming language. I don't think that that's necessarily crucial for everyone, but I think that we really need to know how our world works, the underlying languages that make things run.
Why do you care so much about literacy?
I care about literacy because reading and writing fundamentally are humankind's best ways of making our voice heard. There's only so long that something you say on a stage will last. Even if it's a video that goes viral, say, there may not be a whole lot of people clicking on that link a few years from now. But there's something very special about the written word, about reading something, a lyric that still hasn't gone away since books were first invented.
So how does a teen get to speak in front of the United Nations?
Well, a teen gets to speak in front of the United Nations by having a message that not a whole lot of people have heard before, which is kind of turning the idea of young people always learning from adults on its head and emphasizing the strengths that we have, what organizations have to learn from us.
So tell me your message. Let's hear it. Give me 5 points. What's your message?
I think that young people are underestimated, that learning needs to become more reciprocal, so we aren't just walking into class and expecting that everything comes from our teachers, that adults are willing to learn from us. I think that increasingly adults are playing a game of catch up with young people who are extremely skilled at using the technologies we have available, and that we should really be enlisted to help instead of always being seen as the sources of problems that need to be fixed. We can really be the solutions. So those are some of my key messages around young people.
What if I told you that a 10-year-old doesn't know much, but a 50-year-old has experience, has been able to see, and learn for all these years, and that, that's the way to go?
Experience is great. I mean, I was a Hillary Clinton fan during the primary, so I definitely see the whole experience versus change debate and from a balanced perspective. But I also think that sometimes we underestimate the number of negative things that can sometimes come with experience. I'm only 15, but the number of adversities that I've had to go up against have definitely made me a little more cautious, second guess myself more. That internal voice that says, don't do that, becomes stronger when you have experience to back it up. And so I think that while we definitely need experience, we also need to balance it out with fresh, new perspectives.
So as a 15-year-old, what bad experiences, have you had?
I wouldn't say...
What adversities?
Well, my adversities are nothing on the scale of someone like, say, William Kamkwamba, who had to make a power generator. Even though he wasn't in school, he had no idea how to make electricity work. Those are adversities that are incredibly hard to go up against. But the adversities I faced have definitely been a lot more around organizations not taking me as a young person seriously. When I was 7 years old and I was calling up schools, I can definitely understand why principals were skeptical and said, no, you're just a little kid. We're not going to have you come speak to our classrooms. But I would say that more adversities have come to me through people not believing in possibilities that I'm promoting, as opposed to, say, financial or other restrictions that a lot of people face.
Okay, so you're 7 years old. You're calling schools, and tell me what this call is like. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to do?
The calls that I would make when I was 7 years old were terrifying because I hated calling on people on the phone to tell the truth. It just happened to be an effective way of reaching out. So I would say, hi, my name's Adora Spitak. I published a book. I want to talk about reading and writing to your school. I have this lesson plan that I want to present. And most of the time there would be a little bit of disbelief, like, wait, you're 7? Are you kidding me? And maybe then sometimes there would be a very non-committal answer like, okay, we'll take a look and get back to you. Naturally, that's not much of an answer, and generally they didn't. So I think that after a few of those, you get very stuck in this mindset that no matter what you do, nothing's going to happen, and that's exactly the moment sometimes, if you're lucky, like I often was, that someone comes in, you may realize that actually, yes, things can become true.
What was your lesson plan?
My lesson plan often consisted of some really basic elements, stuffed animals if it was going to be an elementary school group, because there's no better way to start a discussion about characters and how to plan your plot and your setting than getting a bunch of little kids excited about some stuffed animals that if they're really creative and come up with good characters, they might be able to keep. So that was often the first part. And then I would launch into a collaborative writing exercise where we would build a story together, because I feel like oftentimes the way writing is taught is you don't really see the teacher being vulnerable. You don't see the teacher writing with you and making mistakes and editing as you go, and that was a very important part to me. I wanted to be on their level, to be creating something with them. So it would be planning out a story, writing with them, reading out loud, tweaking things, and sometimes I would really like to get some kids to say parts of the story in dramatic voices. That was always fun.
So you like to write. Why teach other kids to write?
I have never been one to say that I just want to kind of stay in a bubble. I'm always all about how do I maximize impact, how do I make a message, if it works, go further. And in my case, it was really, there were also some selfish reasons. I really wanted to have a community of peers who loved to read and write just as much as I did. And I felt like they were missing out. So those were my very basic 7-year-old reasons.
Let's get back to the United Nations. Nervous, calm, emotionally, what was it like?
Emotionally, being at the United Nations was the craziest freaking experience ever. It was like Justin Bieber concert plus meeting, well, it was meeting diplomats, so I guess that's like not even a metaphor there, but it was fangirl and trying to look professional and not break down all at once. And when I stood for this very formal posed photo, which is what the UN is really good at, like standing in front of this tapestry with your body angled unnaturally for 5 minutes, I just had this thought go through my mind that, oh my god, I'm like one of those people in newspapers that I've read since I was little. This is kind of a dream come true. So it was great.
And tell me, what are some of the lessons that adults can learn from kids?
I think that adults can really learn from kids when it comes to our attitudes when we're first presented with challenges, because if you think about the way that a young person takes on a challenge or an idea, oftentimes it'll be, let's try it first, and if we fail, let's do it again. I would present to you any kid who's ever decided that roller skating through the kitchen while eating is a good idea, or any number of questionable things. It's definitely this very, let's try and fail, it's not a big deal if we do. As we grow older, we get conditioned through school to realize that failure is a bad thing, and let's avoid trying if there's too high of a risk. And I think that in a lot of situations, maybe not financial markets, but in a lot of situations, taking risk is a great thing. It means that there's lots of innovation. Things like the X Prize really encourage you to go crazy, go big. And these are the same ideas that young people who dare to dream and try out their ideas really emphasize.
But don't you think that a lot of kids don't understand consequences?
I think that some kids don't understand consequences, that's true, but I know that a lot of kids do understand. Like when I think about myself when I was, 6 years old and doing things that maybe got me in trouble with my parents, I knew in the back of my mind what would happen, but I went ahead and did it anyway because I realized that the payoff of a moment was sometimes so great. And so in much the same way, if there's something that's really going to pay off big, even if sure you might have to do a little bit of damage control, you might have to apologize to your local government for, I don't know, breaking a zoning rule or whatever, there will still be impacts that might stretch way longer.
So what would you do at 6 to get in trouble?
When I was 6 years old, I can remember a time my sister and I went outside and we had these mud cakes that we made for kind of a mud sculpture contest thingy, and I would say melted it down. We just mashed it up with more water, and we decided to make ourselves gorillas, or I don't even know what we were doing. We were slathering it all over ourselves, and then we just run like crazy through the neighborhood and probably terrified others. Washing that off was not fun.
What is the main reason that adults don't take kids or youth seriously?
I think the main reason that adults don't take youth seriously has to do with, well, there are a few things, but one of them is forgetting what it's like to be a kid and forgetting how many good ideas one might have had. Because as we grow older, we kind of look back on ourselves. It's almost like, I heard a quote once, if the past is a foreign land, then younger you must have been a stranger. And I think that a lot of people are like that, where we seem so far removed as we grow up and we try to distance ourselves. But I really try to stay in tune with that little kid that I was. I do insane things. With one of my fellow speakers at the X Prize conference, Jackie and Draco, we were just let's run across that golf course. And it might have been against the rules, but it was really fun. So I think that young people can be taken seriously by adults who remember what it's like to be a kid, who remember the value of the ideas that they had at that time, and who aren't afraid to really think outside the box.
Okay, let's wait 1 second for the sirens.